Hello, fellow cultists. This is DM Nell, and I am back with episode number 11, I believe, of Sotdl Talk. And today we are going to be following up on my last video. I had mentioned a supplement from Dungeons and Dragons that I thought would be excellent, or an excellent resource for Shadow the Demon Lord, and I wanted to expand on that because I just kind of touched on it. But I really do believe that this supplement is just perfectly made for, or at least perfect inspiration for Shadow the Demon Lord. So I want to go back to it and just kind of go through it in a little bit more detail. And the supplement I'm referring to is this one that I'm showing you right now, which is the 3.5 edition supplement known as Elder Evils. And it was actually the sequel to another supplement called Exemplars of Evil, which is this book right here. And this book right here was kind of supposed to be like the low level threats, and then Elder Evil would be the high level threats. I'm not as big a fan of the Exemplars of Evil. I mean, there's some good stuff in here, but it's not as mind blowing as what's in Elder Evil. So I may go back and do a review of that other supplement, but I really want to focus today on Elder Evils because there's some really fantastic stuff in here, and I just wanted to share it with you all because a lot of you are youngsters who don't remember the 3.5 days because you were running around in diapers. And some of you others maybe just didn't bother picking it up back in the day, but this is available on Drive Through RPG as a PDF if you can't find it anywhere else. And I believe the price point is like $14.99. So I wouldn't pick it up unless you plan on using it, but it is an excellent read, even if you don't end up using it. It's just fun to read through. And if you're running a D&D game, again, it's great inspiration for even a D&D game. But we're here to talk about Shadow of the Demon Lord, so let's get right into it. All right, so I'm going to skip a couple of chapters because the first chapter, Evil Doesn't Sleep, is really character options, and we don't need to bother with any of that. So let's go into chapter 2, which talks about the first Elder Evil. And by Elder Evil, basically, this book is talking about world-ending threats. These are like apocalyptic villains. Their presence alone causes the universe to react to them. And so this first one is my favorite, and it is known as Atropos or Atropos, the World-Born Dead. And basically, what you have here is uh, a villain that is a world. It's a moonlet um, that is floating through space, and it is undead. So, and it's sentient and it's undead. So it is probably the biggest and baddest villain your people will ever face, because it's a celestial body. I'm trying to find the picture of it. There it is. And so this is my favorite picture of the world-born dead. And basically, it is a moonlet. It is a small moon that is floating through space, and it attacks worlds, and it's jealous of worlds because it's dead, and living worlds are alive, so it's jealous of them and it wants to destroy them. So it is most definitely a world-ending threat. So coming back here to the start of the chapter, it kind of goes into the background on what the world-born dead is, or what scholars believe it is, and this is a excellent resource for inspiration to get you thinking about how you can build a campaign around this villain, and you can actually build an entire campaign in Shadow of the Demon Lord based on this, because what it does is there is something that that causes Atropos to notice the world. So in Shadow of the Demon Lord, assuming that you're using the core world, Earth, um, something would happen to draw Atropos's attention, and so that something could be a cult that did some kind of ritual that let off some kind of flare, or some kind of signal that reached all the way into wherever this thing is floating in space, and it's making its way throughout the campaign. It's making its way back to Earth, or to Earth, and so the whole campaign is based on what happens as this celestial body starts getting closer and closer to the world. So the section right here, goals, it tells you what Atropos does. It saps the life from worlds and encounters. It is self-aware, but not as mortals can conceive. Atropos devours life energy to replace what it gave into the sucking vacuum. It draws positive energy from those planets and encounters, but the negative energy constituting its existence instantly negates any life it takes. So basically, it's Galactus, except it's in the shape of a moon. All right, so Atropos in the campaign. Here is where you get your ideas for the campaign and the timeline, and it's based on EL encounter levels in Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, but you can pretty much ignore that. Just think of this as the first part here is the low level, or you can think of it as the starting and novice tiers. Then the second one might be the expert tier, and then the third one might be the master tier, third, fourth. Well, okay, so there's a lot more. So anyway, just you can just read through these, and you can separate them by tier as appropriate. So the first and second one might actually be the starting and novice tier. The second and or the third and fourth one might be expert, and so on. So I'm not going to read through all this because it's a lot of information, but I am going to just kind of start it off so that you can get an idea of what this book does. So right here under timeline, it says what follows is a possible timeline, campaign timeline coded with encounter levels to help you construct adventures around the key events that might transpire as Atropos approaches. So this doesn't hand you a campaign. It basically gives you ideas so that you can build your own campaign using this villain and using the NPCs associated with this villain to drive the story forward. So you have here the first NPC that's introduced, Kara Zastin. She was driven mad with grief at the loss of her husband and vows revenge on the gods. Having heard wild rumors of the world-born dead, she sends out her minions to steal a manuscript held in a vault beneath a cathedral in one of the largest cities in your setting. And this could be Kakros, or it could be one of the cities of the Confederacy of the Nine, or it can be one of the cities in the Northern Reach. But anyway, it should be a big enough city where it has. Well, actually, it doesn't really need to be a big city. It just needs to be someplace that has a cathedral, or someplace where an obscure manuscript might be hidden. Her minions succeed and snatch the book, leaving scores of priests dead. The church hires the PCs to find out who was behind the robbery and recover the tome. The PCs manage to attain the book, but not before Kara has a chance to learn its mysteries. So the PCs are contacted by the priests, having deciphered the old tome. The clerics suspect that whoever sought the book intends to summon the world-born dead. And basically, it goes on to talk about, why the PCs are inspired or hired to go after Kara and to stop her from summoning Atropos. So anyway, again, excellent resources to build your own adventures and incorporate this information as much or as little as you want. Of course, you're going to have to substitute out, Shadow of the Demon Lord stuff for, the D&D stuff that's inherent in this with Shadow of the Demon Lord stuff. So, that shouldn't be too difficult to do. All right, now one of the cool sections down here I want to point out real quick is the sign. So for each of these elder evils, there is a sign that is associated with them, and the sign is basically the universe reacting to the presence of this elder evil, or the uh, the encroaching of the elder evil into the campaign. So for Atropos, the sign is the restless dead. Atropos' presence in the sky causes the dead to rise from their graves. Necromancy spells, and okay, so it's separating the faint, moderate, and strong, and overwhelming. So this is the progression as this world gets closer to Earth. This is the progression of the sign. So it starts off as faint. Necromancy spells and spell-like abilities are cast at +2 caster level. So basically, it would be, these type of spells are more potent. So you might want to, in Shadow of the Demon Lord, rather than a +2 caster level, you might want to give them, 2 boons where appropriate, to attack, or 2 banes to save against. Whenever a living creature dies, a 20% chance exists that it will spontaneously rise as a zombie or maybe some other kind of undead. The moderate sign is as faint, but the chance of spontaneous animation is increased to 40%. In addition, the entire campaign setting is affected as if by a desecrate spell. So a desecrate spell, if I remember correctly, basically just it causes holy places to not be holy anymore, or to be less holy. I'd have to go back and see what the current version in D&D is, because I haven't read it in quite a while. But anyway, so you would have to substitute that something from Shadow of the Demon Lord out that emulates that. Strong as moderate, but the chance of spontaneous animation increases to 80%. So at this point, 80% of the people that die in the world rise as zombies. So it's starting to get bad at this point. And you might want to even say that it becomes illegal to kill for any reason. So, it's probably illegal to kill anyway, but even executions might be halted because of the chance of these things rising as undead. So the final one here is overwhelming. Let me back up here. So, in addition, the campaign is affected by an Hallow spell. Casting Hallow removes this effect. All conjuration healing spells and similar spell-like abilities are impeded, meaning the caster must succeed on a spellcraft check or lose the spell slot without effect. So, healing spells are now starting to be sucked away, and the casters have to actually make a check of some sort, so a challenge roll in Shadow, to actually keep the spell. And then overwhelming, the overwhelming sign is as strong, but any creature that dies automatically rises as a zombie. Previously, dead creatures automatically animate as skeletons or zombies, and all undead creatures gain extra hit points. So everything that's dead rises. They're tougher than they normally are, and they gain turn resistance, which is a D&D thing. So those are the signs, and you can see how that progresses as the world gets closer. So let's just kind of move on here. This is actually something, once the world-born dead gets to the planet and starts sucking the life out of it, the PCs would be tasked to actually go to the world-born dead and to try to stop it. And I forget how that's done exactly, but when the PCs arrive there, then the world-born dead reacts to them by creating this aspect of Atropos to fight them. So it's not expected that the PCs are going to actually kill a moon, because that's probably not possible. But in killing its aspect, it wounds Atropos enough to cause it to leave. And the aspect of Atropos is supposed to be a badass. It is in D&D it has 858 hit points, which is quite a bit. 66 hit dice. It's a CR 23 monster, so it is most definitely a challenge it would have to be a challenge for master tier um, uh, characters. So you could take a look at the D&D stats here and try to emulate that as much as possible in Shadow of the Demon Lord, or you can just take an existing Demon Lord, which is in the Hunger in the Void supplement, and just kind of just reskin it so that it is Atropos. All right, so that's really all I wanted to mention about this particular one. As you can see, it's got stats for the NPC Karazastin. There's other NPCs that can be used as well. Gorguth, which is a demon. Actually, it is a Ultraloth, I think. I forget. It is. It's a Bodak. Okay. Well, it's an undead. It's an undead thing. All right, so it's got the Gorguth as another NPC, and I think that's it. Another thing it has here is a spell that was from the Book of Vile Darkness that Monty Cook had originally written for 3.5 and D&D 3.5, and it is a spell that basically just rains death and destruction down upon a large area of a countryside. So this would also be something cool to add to the campaign as maybe a high level or a high rank spell that the NPC gets a hold of. And the Apocalypse from the Skies would be like a ritual, maybe, or a spell that requires a significant sacrifice in order to get it to go off. But you can see it basically causes damage to everything within a 10-mile radius, and this is what Kara wants to use to draw the attention of Atropos. So basically, mass, large-scale death attracts the attention of Atropos. Okay, there's also some maps that can be used. That is the surface of the moonlit. There's some encounters that can be used here if you want to reskin those, and that's okay. So that's about it. So let me go on to the next one, Father Limmick. I don't know as much about Father Limmick. I think he's just some kind of elven ice god. But basically, this particular elder evil is supposed to be the death by ice scenario. So Father Limmick is a creature that would be frozen in a glacier, or maybe an aspect of it is frozen in a glacier. And when it's discovered, then it begins to spread the glacier throughout the world. So let's see. Father Limmick sleeps in an icy prison atop one of the world's tallest mountains, locked away inside a glacier. He beckons any who draw near his form so that they might be transformed into his servants. So his servants go out and try to free the dude. And again, it has the timeline, starting adventures. It has the signs here, and the signs would be let's see. The dead sun diminishes natural and magical lighting until the sun no longer rises. So the sign is dead sun. So the sun basically starts to fizzle out when Father Limmick starts waking up. So this kind of reminds me of a storyline in the DC comics. So anyway, let me go through this here in just a sec. Okay, so the dead sun starts off with the faint sign, which is the radius of illumination from natural light sources, both bright and shadow illumination, drops to half normal to a minimum of 5 feet. Sunrise occurs an hour later than normal, and sunset occurs an hour earlier than normal. So, okay, yeah, that's weird. It's kind of darker than usual. Then it goes to the moderate. All spells and spell-like abilities that have a darkness descriptor are enhanced. Their cast is affected by the the radius of illumination from natural light sources drops to 5 feet. Sunrise occurs 2 hours later than normal, and sunset occurs 2 hours earlier. So it's getting darker. Days are getting shorter. The average temperature drops by 2 degrees all over the world. The next one's strong. It just gets worse and worse. Things get darker, things get colder, and the sun just gets less and less. And then finally, the sun vanishes altogether, and the temperature in the world is, basically Arctic. So Father Limerick is, the death by ice scenario. And so it's got the stats for Father Limerick here. Again, you'd have to reskin that. His brood would be the minions of Father Limerick. And let's see, brood fever. It shows how creatures can be transformed into his brood. And there's a picture of something that could be a brood transformed creature. I think this is a ogre that has been transformed into Father Limerick's brood, a brood ogre, and some NPCs to spread the crazy word of Father Limerick. Here's his glacial tomb, a map that hides the Elder Evil himself, trapped in a mountain, and so on. So there you go. That is the Father Limerick scenario. The Hulks of Zaretha. I kind of like this one because it is kind of reminiscent of, for me anyway, and I mentioned this in my last video, they kind of remind me of the Easter Island hits. And I've always had this kind of weird fascination with Easter Island because of those I think they're called moai. And the moai just look like, creatures that might just pull themselves out of the earth and start, rampaging. So imagine the hulks of Zaretha are unearthed somewhere, and there are just like hundreds of thousands of these things. Actually, I don't know if there are hundreds of thousands. There might be a limited number of them, but there's a lot of them, and they are basically just statues. So whoever have seen them or know them, just kind of maybe they worship them, maybe they just think of them as an oddity from the ancient times that has survived into modern times. Whatever. The whole point is that at some point, somehow these things wake up, and when they wake up, they just start rampaging across the world. And these things are supposed to be for the most part, indestructible. So the sign is let's see. Let me back up here. It says Zaretha scrolls. So these would be a way that the hoax could be awakened, which would be by, let's see, scribed on, identified, somehow endure the millennia. Now crumbling Zaretha scrolls are not inherently magical, nor do they radiate magic. And the words contained within the scrolls have a magical effect that occurs when they're read. Let's see, every hour spent reading Zaretha scrolls increases the chance of forming a mystical link between the scrolls and the nightmare beings that inspired them. Chances per hour are cumulative. If the link is formed, it remains open until the reader stops reading. When the link's open, anyone reading or touching the scrolls is affected by the Hulk's dark visiting malefic property. But the sign can affect any character. And okay, so anyway, it causes insanity. Right. All right. So let's see here. It gives you things that the Hulks can be connected to. 5 Hulks. Oh, there are 5 Hulks. Okay. Well, there's only 5. I kind of envision there being hundreds. So that would be how, hundreds or thousands of them. That would be how I would interpret it. But let's see here. The 5 Hulks are connected with the elements, colors, and basic appearance of the Hulks. One of the 3 chants needed to awaken the Hulks. One of the 6 material components of the awakening ritual. Okay, so obviously I haven't read this in a long time, so I don't really remember this scenario. But just the whole concept is very evocative, and it is just fueling ideas for me right now as how I could use this in a campaign setting. So let's see what the signs are. The blood moon. So the blood moon sets tempers on edge, making people aggressive and angry. So the faint sign would be the starting attitudes of all living intelligent creatures and characters are reduced by 1 step. Okay, so it's people are pissed off more, and so trying to interact with them might, in Shadow of the Demon Lord terms, might be harder. So you might have a Bane in social combat with or under the faint sign, and then it just increases. Under the moderate sign, it is even harder for people to get along. So two Banes, and then so on. Overwhelming would be as strong, but the DC will rage intensifies to an insane frenzy. So people are so pissed off that they're just, maybe they're rage zombies at this point, and 28 days later, and they just start rampaging mindlessly across the world. So let's see, description. So this talks about the what the Hulks look like. It looks like, I guess there are four female Hulks and a male Hulk. Okay. And over 20 feet in height, blocky, vaguely humanoid, traced with indecipherable carvings. They do not look female in a mammalian sense and are not beautiful. One monolith is mottled red and orange. One is gray stone with pale blue veins. The third is brown with sickly green blotches, and so on. All right, it gives the stats for the Hulks, and I guess that's the picture of them right there. Again, for me, I would probably make them bigger. I would probably make more of them, and I would probably, it actually kind of reminds me also of the second Hellboy movie with the Golden Army. Basically, an indestructible army that just, you can destroy them, but they reform. So that's kind of what's the ideas that are forming in my head. But it might be totally different if you read it. I apologize for not knowing more about this. I probably should have read the supplement again before doing this review. But this is more to bring it to your attention rather than to read it to you or to educate you on it. So again, this has maps, it has NPCs, and it has lots of stuff that you can reskin into your own campaigns. All right, the Leviathan. This is basically your sea monster devouring the world scenario, and so this kind of brings to mind the world serpent from Norse mythology. And let's see, spawned by the raw and undiluted chaos of creation, the world-spanning creature called the Leviathan slumbers deep beneath the waves, its dreams and stirrings producing monsters and disaster in the world above. Few on the surface are aware of the terrible threat that the Leviathan represents, but in the depths of the ocean, a creature of unspeakable evil seeks to use the mighty creature for its own nefarious purposes. So this would be maybe a seafaring campaign monster or boss monster. And let's see the goals. Leviathan's only real goal, if it can be said to have one, is to act in accordance with its nature. Given its creation and composition, the Leviathan's nature is simply chaos in its most destructive form. As it approaches wakefulness, the Leviathan's unconscious movements grow more frequent and violent, creating devastating catastrophes and producing deadly creatures. When it wakes, the oceans boil in rage, whole continents slide into the abyssal deeps, and the entire world shudders. So this campaign builds towards the awakening of the Leviathan, and its sign is eerie weather. The impending awakening of the Leviathan is heralded by abnormal weather that becomes more and more widespread as the sign becomes stronger. Eerie weather occurs once every 2 weeks and affects the creature. This is the faint sign. Affects an area of 2 to 20 miles, and it just gets worse from there. Then there's some table on some random weather that eventually occurs under the overwhelming section. So there you go. Crazy weather. It also gives you the campaign timeline ideas. Let's see. This one starts with a coastal region that includes a major port city is experiencing earth tremors and wild weather conditions. Movement into and out of the city is seriously impeded, and many believe that the freak weather conditions to be the work of evil magic or angry deities. A few madmen or old sailors insist that the Leviathan is stirring, but they are ignored. The characters distinguish themselves by helping the city survive a great tsunami or similar extreme weather event. They attract the notice of the city's leaders, who ask them for help in seeking the source of the strange weather conditions. So, what is the source? We don't know at this point. Apparently, there's a cult of the Leviathan, maybe fish people. I don't know. Could be Lovecraftian stuff here. So that is the Leviathan, and again, there's stats, there's an aspect, there's NPCs, and there are maps that can give you some inspiration. And this is actually, this is one of the spines of the Leviathan. That's 1,500 feet in height, ginormous. So yeah, maybe it's even one of the smaller spines. Just one of the tail spines. They're just barely visible on the surface of the tail. Anyway, all right, so that's the Leviathan. Just a few more to go here. So Pandorum. All right, I know least about some of these last ones here, but let's give this a go. Pandorum, I believe, is a creature that exists in a madness realm. Let's see here. Long ago, a cabal of foolish wizards violated the laws of the multiverse in search for their ever-grading power. They discovered places in between the planes that should never have been breached. They angered the deities to defend themselves. Sought a weapon with which to destroy the gods, and they bent their wills towards a quasi-reality best described as perpendicular to that of the normal universe, which in D&D is a great wheel. The dark enticement of the chance to slay the deities called to the material plane a sentient singularity of scarcely fathomable power and unrelenting destructiveness. Given the name Pandorum by its summoners, it sought greedily to fulfill the terms of its contract, but was instead imprisoned. Knowing that they couldn't hold Pandorum's full might with magic, mortal or divine, they cleaved its alien psyche from its body, trapping the former in a crystal prison beneath the city, and the latter in a transdimensional space that touches the multiverse only at one point. Okay, so uh, you know this is prime Shadow of the Demon Lord stuff. A bunch of stupid wizards. Um, pissed off the gods. So to defend themselves against the pissed off gods, they summon something that an unknown thing that lives between the planes. So the void, maybe, yeah. So this thing that they call Pandorum, obviously they realized once it started coming that it was more than they could handle, so they managed to trap it before it was able to fully realize in this reality, and so that is how the thing got here. Now the campaign is how the thing awakens and causes trouble and destroys the world eventually. So it gives you the timeline again. It gives you the goal. So Pandorum seeks above all else the reunion of its potent mind with its unstoppable form. Um, from those whose minds held up, or at least for a time, to the impossible might of its psyche, the terrible weapon has learned of the destruction of its betrayers. It suspects that the descendants might yet exist of those who lured and snared it, and once it achieves its freedom, Pandorum will seek revenge on those innocents for the crimes of their ancestors. After vengeance, of course, it intends to complete the end of its bargain it struck millennium ago. Once it's finished these tasks, Pandorum will return to its reality. All right, so it wants to obliterate all the gods. Okay. Well, um, let's see. That would be Pandorum's goals, and let's see. The sign for Pandorum, Seal of Binding. This sign manifests as a glyph that spreads across the sky and increasingly interferes with planar communication and transportation. So basically, her presence or its presence is causing static, magical static that is interfering with summoning, teleporting, 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 and magical communication. So good stuff there. It's not as interesting to me, but if you're into that type of campaign, then there you go. You got lots of ideas to go with. Looks like it's kind of a psionic thing. So maybe if you're using you know those magical traditions in your campaign, then this might be a good monster to feature, or a good shadow to feature. All right, some NPCs there. Looks like a clockwork dude. See, I'm telling you, Schwab subconsciously was building towards Shadow the Demon Lord when he wrote this book. All right, lots of maps for encounters. The next one is Ragnora. Ragnora is a twisted, irresistible force of creation. She exists to spawn life in her own terrible image. Legends tell of her spores raining down upon the world to fester. The spores parasitize plants and animals, raising blisters that birth monsters, killing hosts. Even inanimate objects sprout hideous creatures. Some unfortunate sentients infected by spores become aberrant hybrids. So Ragnar is known as the mother of monsters. She creates monsters, and so her presence just either spawns monsters from plants or animals, or it creates monsters or warps people or existing monsters into worse monsters that obviously serve her because they're her mom. So that is Ragnora, and what this is evoking in me is a campaign that features all kinds of monsters, not undead, not demons, but just your run of the mill monsters that are powered up, juiced up with Ragnora leading them, and maybe even led by some kind of kaiju, a mega monster like the Tarask, as the as her number one son, or whatever, or daughter. So let's see. The sign Twisted Life. The sign manifests as a surge of corrupt, positive energy that resculpts life on an entire world. The faint. All spells and effect. Excuse me. All spells and effects that use positive energy are cast with a boon. Conjuration healing spells are cast with 2 boons, and attempts to turn undead are treated as though they're made by. That doesn't apply to Shadow Moderate. As faint, but in addition, warts and blemishes appear on living targets of conjuration spells, unsightly growths. So things start to warp at this point. They may be more potent, but they are also starting to mutate. Strong as moderate, DC to resist these spores or remove the blemishes increases, so it makes it harder to get rid of the mutations, and it just keeps going in that direction. All right, so again, it gives you the campaign progression ideas. There's an idea of what Ragnora could potentially look like. And let's see here. Malshapers. Ragnoria's twisted life not only on the material plane, but also on the ethereal plane and plane of shadow. It didn't really apply to Shadow, the Demon Lord, but they could be other worlds or other parts of the void, or even other parts of the universe. Let's see here. These fanatics believe they have a duty to guide. Okay, Malshaper sounds like a cult. Flesh warpers are common among the Malshapers, as are signs of. Okay. All right. So gives Ragnar stats there. A true mother, when Ragnar has restored herself sufficiently, or when she comes under attack, she sheds her current form and merges with the Neurotangle. What the hell? In her true mother form, Ragnar is impossible to attack directly and gains new abilities. However, she is also weakened. So okay. So yeah, sounds like she mutates as she is attacked. So progeny of Ragnora. These are mutated creatures. You'd have to read through that to see how that could be emulated in Shadow the Demon Lord. Maybe add mutations to monsters. Maybe just boost them up a little bit, give them some weird attacks or weird mutations. Then some NPCs. So let's move on. This video is getting longer than I wanted it to be, but that's okay. Sotdl. This is the serpent god or creature, elder evil. And honestly, I think this is the one I know the least. So let's see what Sotdl is. The Vanguard of Sotdl is an ancient organization of murderers and raiders that has risen and fallen over the millennia. Thousands of years ago, these nihilistic Wanti, snake people, whose priests taught that the worship of the gods was unnecessary to gain divine power, surged from a trackless fen to lay siege to the surrounding nations. Vanguard was defeated, and his teachings proved immortal. Yeah. Every few hundred years, a new zealot takes up the cause. All right, blah, 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 blah. Let's see. Following feature is a demon lord. Okay, so this is a demon lord. So, okay, snake demon lord. That's easy to fit in. Search for true reason for waging war on the material plane, more than mere jealousy. He wishes to return to the abyss and reclaim his realm. Now at the time of the Queen of Chaos has passed. Okay, so it sounds like Sotdl was banished from whatever part of the void he resided in, or it resided in, by another demon, and it wants to go back and reclaim that. Yeah, I'm not really sure how that would fit in Shadow of the Demon Lord. I would think that maybe it sought to claim Earth's reality and was somehow defeated by another demon. And now that that other demon has also been defeated, then Sotdl, is using his minions to bring him back into our reality. So basically, this would ultimately boil down to, some cult summoning the snake god to destroy the world. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So that's typical Shadow of the Demon Lord stuff. So you got a timeline here. So this is going to be mostly a snake-oriented campaign. Snakes and serpents are the signs. So yeah, you got snakes and serpents all over the place. And not my favorite. Not something that really is exciting me as far as giving me ideas and stuff. But it may stoke your creative juices if you are into snakes. So there you go, Sotdl. The next one is the worm that walks. This is one I talked about in my last video, and this is the one that was originally, this is the Elder Evil that was originally in the Age of Worms campaign that Paizo had written for Dungeon Magazine way back in the 2000s, the decade of the 2000s, for those of you that remember that decade. And it was a very interesting campaign. I ran it a couple years ago in D&D, and for 5th edition D&D. And it's a classic world-ending scenario. It's got an interesting villain, which is Caius, who has the Caius zombies, which are the zombies that are infested with green worms. These green worms themselves aren't undead, and they just animate the bodies that they infest. So really, if you don't want to run yet another undead type of end of world scenario, there's already enough of those. What I would do, and I would recommend doing instead, is having Caius be a vermin demon or a vermin entity, and it's worms and it's creatures. All of our okay. So Caius would be the master of all vermin. So vermin are insects, rats, just all those things that we typically think of that are gross, carry diseases, skulk in the shadowy, dirty, disgusting places of the world. Maggots, all that stuff. So, and vermin is a category in D&D. I don't think it is in Shadow of the Demon Lord. Although it might be. So what I would do is, if I were to use Caius or the Worm That Walks in a Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign, I would make him master of all vermin. And these vermin can form colony beings. They can form, or they can infest a body and animate it. They could be used to control a living thing. So, the burrowing worm that was in Star Trek 2, that could be a thing in this campaign. So it's given me all kinds of fresh ideas, totally separate from the Age of Worms campaign. Um, and then this section of the Elder Evils also gives you other ideas, although I think it kind of goes along the undead path in this book, but it still gives you lots of inspiration on how to use the world-born dead, and using the whole legend of Caius in D&D as inspiration. Again, vermin swarm out, infesting the world. The worm that walks would be Caius himself, a giant colony creature. Basically, once he manifests. And actually, I would say that as he's manifesting, he continues to grow. So as he's walking along, all the vermin that are the millions and trillions, millions and billions and trillions of vermin that are exist in the earth, all the insects in the forest, the rats, all these things just continuously feed its form, making him bigger and bigger as he walks. So once he manifests, I would say that you have to kill him fast. Otherwise, he's just going to continue getting bigger and bigger until he finally is big enough to just infest the entire world and destroy all life, or replace it with his vermin life. All right, so the NPCs include Edwin Tolstoff, who is a colony. He's a wizard that worshipped this worm that walks, and because he worshipped him, his body started to transform into a colony of worms that that disgusts him, but gives him power, and so he still dresses in robes. Because this colony of worms can maintain a humanoid shape, and he has this mask, so, if you're interacting with him, you might think of him just as a weird dude that covers himself completely. But you can see maybe some writhing in the robes, just making him even creepier to talk to. All right, so that is the worm that walks, and there's one last elder evil that I want to point out here, and that is Zargon. All right, Zargon, I think, is just a really simple elder evil. Um, he is he's a monster who's got a horn. Somehow the horn was broken off of him and hidden away. And Zargon, when the horn was broken off, he was banished, or he turned into stone, a statue maybe, or maybe he turned into a mountain. Who knows? I'm sure it says here, but basically the bottom line is the some cult or some crazy dude, or some mis mis misinformed zealot is trying to gain power, and they find the horn, or the horn is unearthed, and some these people are trying to reunite the horn with the statue, and as they do so, the weather gets weird. Um, Ultimately, the horn is reunited with the monster, and it just starts rampaging and destroying everything. So this could be a not necessarily a world-ending event, but it could definitely be a kingdom-ending threat. So if you don't necessarily want to run an apocalyptic campaign, you can definitely run a campaign where you have a big bad monster that is rampaging at the end, and your heroes have to kill it. It's much smaller in scope than the end of the world. It's much easier to deal with, I think, if you're a newer set of players and DM or GM. So this would probably be what I would recommend to use as maybe one of your first shadows beyond the Shadow of the Demon Lord uh, book. All right, so yeah, I think that is it for my review of Elder Evils. Let me see if there's any other gems in this book that I want to mention. Nope, that is it. So you have here, what, 9 different inspirations for different shadows for your Shadow of the Demon Lord campaign. And I hope that reviewing this has sparked some ideas for you. And again, this book is available on Drive-Thru RPG in PDF form. If you're lucky, you might be able to pick up a copy maybe in a used bookstore or maybe on eBay, although you might be spending more than $14.99 to do so. I personally, I love this book. It's one of my favorite books. I have sold a lot of my 3.5 edition books, but I kept this one just because it's so rich with ideas. So there you go, cultists. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope to maybe hear from some of you that has gotten some ideas from this book, and are thinking of starting up a campaign based on something in the Elder Evil. So at any rate, thank you for watching once again, and I give you a hearty hail.